When my son Daniel screamed at me that I was a useless burden who should have been put in a nursing home years ago before driving away and leaving me stranded in a blizzard outside the Walmart parking lot on Christmas Eve, he had no idea he was abandoning Margaret Chen, the founder and silent majority owner of Pinnacle Credit Solutions, the financial services conglomerate that controlled the credit reporting algorithms for all three major bureaus, owned the mortgage servicing rights to his $850,000 suburban home, held the master servicing agreements for his wife's student loans and car financing, and whose debt collection subsidiary had been quietly monitoring his family's spending patterns for potential credit line increases, all while he dismissed his senile old mother as deadweight, who was too stupid to understand how credit cards work, never knowing that his cruel abandonment would cost him his 720 credit score, force him into financial ruin, and leave him literally begging at payday loan offices just to keep the lights on. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment about your worst experience with ungrateful family members who abandoned you when you needed help most, and subscribe because you won't believe what happens when a cruel son discovers that his financially illiterate mother actually controls the entire credit system that determines whether his family can buy a house, get a loan, or even qualify for a decent apartment lease. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm 72 years old, and this story begins on December when I returned from what Daniel thought was just another pointless shopping trip where I'd probably get confused and buy the wrong things, but was actually a closed-door emergency board meeting with Pinnacle Credit Solutions Executive Committee, where I'd been finalizing the new AI-driven credit assessment protocols that would either help struggling families rebuild their financial futures or systematically destroy the creditworthiness of people who demonstrated character failures that made them unworthy of financial trust, depending on how they chose to treat the elderly family members whose financial empire had been quietly protecting their economic stability for decades. The small two-bedroom duplex in Minneapolis's Powderhorn neighborhood, where I've lived for the past 12 years, appears to visitors as a humble retirement home of a widowed former bank teller who survives on Social Security and the occasional help that my family provides out of obligation rather than genuine care. The carefully maintained herb garden in my backyard, featuring hardy Minnesota perennials like purple coneflower and black-eyed Susan, that I tend with dollar store gardening tools, suggests someone whose greatest pleasure comes from nurturing small growing things because she can't afford more expensive hobbies. The carefully arranged collection that Daniel observes during his increasingly impatient monthly visits, organized by expiration date in repurposed prescription bottles, reinforces every assumption about my limited financial resources and supposed inability to understand modern economic system. The expired grocery store circulars I study at my kitchen table, highlighting deals on generic brands and markdown produce, create the perfect image of a retired woman who counts every penny and celebrates finding a 20-cent savings on canned vegetables. My morning routine, as observed by Daniel during his dutiful but increasingly brief visits, reinforces every assumption about my limited capabilities and complete dependence on family financial support. He sees me shuffling around in house slippers at 9 a.m., wearing a faded cardigan over a nightgown that suggests someone who has nowhere important to go, and no schedule more demanding than the daily soap opera programming that he assumes represents the intellectual peak of my entertainment needs. The carefully maintained budget recipes I clip from newspapers and organize in a recipe box that my late husband Harold built in 1987, the second-hand winter coats I wear from Goodwill that still carry the faint scent of other people's lives, and the expired coupons I organize in my purse all suggest someone whose greatest financial decision involves choosing between name brand and generic medications at the pharmacy, where I smile gratefully when the young pharmacist explains insurance copayments for the third time this month. The 2008 Honda Civic I drive, with its rust spots from 13 Minnesota winters, the duct tape holding the passenger mirror in place, and the blanket covering the torn upholstery in the back seat, tells a story of financial necessity rather than choice. The roadside assistance membership Daniel pays for because mom can't afford car repairs, and the gas station credit card he monitors to make sure she doesn't overspend, reinforce his comfortable assumption that I'm barely maintaining my independence while struggling to understand financial systems that have supposedly left my generation behind. The image of confused Grandma Margaret, with her sensible shoes from Payless, reading glasses from the dollar store that she loses twice a week, and tendency to ask Daniel to explain how online banking works again during his visits, has served me perfectly in maintaining privacy while protecting the financial empire that my family has never suspected controls their economic destiny, from credit scores to mortgage approvals to employment, background checks that determine which jobs they qualify for and which opportunities remain permanently out of reach. What my son Daniel sees during his increasingly impatient visits is exactly what I've cultivated since Harold's death 12 years ago: a sweet but slightly confused elderly woman who struggles with modern technology, needs help understanding medical bills that seem to grow more complicated every year, and whose greatest excitement comes from feeding birds in Powderhorn Park and organizing monthly potluck dinners at the neighborhood senior center, where I supposedly spend my days playing bingo and sharing stories about the good old days when people respected their elders. The duplex that Daniel dismisses as barely worth the $1,200 monthly rent we're helping with actually serves as my private command center for operations that extend far beyond retirement living. The modest living room, with its cheerful displays of family photos, Daniel's college graduation, his wife Jessica's nursing school ceremony, my granddaughters Emma and Sophie, whom I see 3 times a year if I'm lucky, and carefully organized bookshelves, conceals sophisticated financial coordination systems where I manage credit portfolios oversee consumer lending algorithms that determine economic opportunities for millions of American families, and direct the financial infrastructure networks that have made me one of the nation's most influential but invisible economic leaders. The family photos themselves tell a carefully curated story of a grandmother whose greatest pride comes from her successful son and daughter-in-law who've made something of themselves in the modern world. Daniel's University of Minnesota business degree hangs in a modest frame next to Jessica's nursing certification, both positioned where visitors can see them immediately upon entering my living room. These displays reinforce the narrative that I'm an elderly relative whose vicarious pride in family accomplishments represents the closest she'll ever come to understanding the business and financial worlds that her educated relatives navigate with such impressive expertise. The Powderhorn Community Library that Daniel knows about, where I supposedly help elderly patrons learn to use computers and organize book discussion groups for people who don't have anything better to do, reinforces his assumption that I'm staying busy during retirement with activity appropriate for someone whose intellectual capabilities have declined to the point where volunteering represents the maximum responsibility I can handle without becoming confused or overwhelmed by complex tasks. The hidden empire. What Daniel has never suspected is that the modest lifestyle and occasional requests for technological assistance aren't because I'm incapable of understanding modern financial systems. I designed most of them. The quantum encrypted servers humming quietly in my basement, disguised as the furnace and water heater that any normal duplex would require, process over 2.3 million credit transactions daily across the upper Midwest region, while coordinating with Federal Reserve systems that determine monetary policy and consumer lending standards throughout the American financial ecosystem. The library shifts he thinks represent my attempt to stay busy during retirement are actually cover for coordinating business operations across a network of financial institutions that control $127 billion in consumer credit, determine the economic futures of over 18 million American families, and establish the lending standards that banks throughout Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and the Dakotas use to evaluate mortgage applications, business loans, and educational financing that can transform struggling families into middle-class stability or systematic economic exclusion. Behind the false wall in my basement, accessible through a biometric scanner disguised as my late husband Harold's old toolbox, a Minnesota-made Craftsman that he bought in 1983, and used for 40 years of home repairs, lies a command center with quantum-encrypted communication systems rival what the Federal Reserve uses for their most sensitive financial operations, the multiple monitor displays when activated through voice commands that Daniel has never heard because he assumes I'm too technologically challenged to use anything more sophisticated than a flip phone. Show real-time data streams from all 3 major credit bureaus, mortgage servicing companies across 14 states, and the predictive algorithms that determine which loan applications get approved and which families face systematic financial exclusion. The enterprise-grade fiber optic internet connection that enters my building through the utility room and connects directly to my hidden financial operations center provides bandwidth capabilities that exceed what most community banks can afford for their entire operation. The AI-powered monitoring systems that track every credit card transaction, loan payment, and financial decision, made by over 12,000 families in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan area, operate on infrastructure that I personally designed to identify character pattern, family relationship dynamics, and moral decision-making that predict long-term financial responsibility, more accurately than traditional credit scoring models that focus only on payment history and debt-to-income ratio. But perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of my hidden financial empire is the character assessment protocol that evaluates how people treat elderly family members, community obligation, and intergenerational respect as primary indicators of their trustworthiness for major financial commitments, like mortgages, business loans, and educational financing that could determine their family's economic trajectories for generations. The irony that I've achieved complete financial invisibility while running one of the nation's most influential credit assessment organizations would be apparent to Daniel if he possessed the sophistication to recognize the contradiction between my apparent technological helplessness and the fact that no information about Margaret Chen appear in any financial database searches. My duplex occupies half of a building that I purchased through a network of shell companies in 2012 for a transaction that appeared in public records as an investment by Northland Property Management LLC, a name generic enough to avoid attracting attention while providing the legal framework necessary for strategic real estate development throughout the Twin Cities metropolitan area. The building's current valuation of $890,000 reflects both Powderhorn's transformation into a gentrified neighborhood and the strategic improvements I've coordinated to ensure that my headquarters remains both inconspicuous and operationally sophisticated. The other half of the duplex, which Daniel has never seen despite 12 years of occasional visits, houses what building permits and insurance records describe as residential rental unit, but actually contains my private office suites, enterprise-grade server room, and secure meeting facilities where I conduct face-to-face negotiations with Federal Reserve officials, state banking commissioner, and international financial leaders whose identities would surprise anyone who assumes that important banking decisions happen only in glass towers with corporate logos and marble lobbies in New York and Chicago. The basement serves as my primary financial operations center, featuring a conference room with holographic display capabilities that enable real-time collaboration with team members in Pinnacle Credit Solutions offices throughout Minneapolis, Des Moines, Milwaukee, and Fargo. The custom-designed furniture appears to be modest office equipment purchased from commercial suppliers, but each piece contains hidden technology that provides secure communications, biometric monitoring, and emergency protocols that could evacuate me from the building within 60 seconds if security threats were detected by the building's AI monitoring system. The utility room houses what insurance documents describe as computer equipment for small business operations, but actually contains server farms with processing power that rivals what major universities use for complex economic research. The cooling system, disguised as standard HVAC equipment that any Minnesota basement would require, maintain optimal operating temperatures for quantum computing processors that run predictive algorithms for consumer credit markets, housing affordability analysis, and economic trend forecasting that gives Pinnacle Credit Solutions competitive advantages worth billions of dollars in strategic decision-making. The building's external appearance carefully maintains the aesthetic of a renovated duplex that fits seamlessly into Powderhorn's architectural character. The solar panels on the roof appear to be standard residential installations, designed to reduce utility costs for an elderly woman on a fixed income, but actually provide redundant power systems that ensure my operations continue uninterrupted even during major power grid failures that affect the broader Twin Cities area during severe winter storms or extreme summer heat events that strain Minnesota's electrical infrastructure. Perhaps the most significant aspect of my carefully maintained image is how completely it has concealed my role as the founder and CEO of Pinnacle Credit Solutions, the financial services conglomerate that has quietly dominated consumer credit assessment, mortgage risk evaluation, and lending standard development for the past 28 years. My partnership with visionary economists, strategic investors, and financial technology innovators has created a network of essential services, supporting system and industry relationships that determines which American families achieve financial stability and which face systematic economic exclusion in the nation's most competitive credit market. Pinnacle Credit Solutions operates through a complex structure of subsidiaries, holding companies, and regulatory compliance agreements that ensure both privacy and operational efficiency across multiple financial sectors. The company's public face consists of professional executives, regulatory affairs specialists, and media relations teams who handle all external communications while protecting my identity as the ultimate decision-maker, whose strategic vision guides every aspect of the company's operations, from algorithm development to acquisition strategies that reach entire market segments within the American financial ecosystem. Our corporate structure includes Pinnacle Credit Analytics, which provides the risk assessment algorithms that enable over 4,300 community banks to evaluate loan applications without investing millions of dollars in their own data analysis infrastructure. Pinnacle Consumer Services develops and licenses the specialized applications that allow credit unions to compete with major national banks by accessing enterprise-level capabilities at community-friendly prices. Pinnacle Venture Capital identifies and supports promising financial technology entrepreneurs whose innovations could democratize access to credit or create entirely new categories of economic opportunity for underserved communities. But the most crucial aspect of Pinnacle Credit Solutions' influence is our ownership of the fundamental credit infrastructure that powers America's consumer lending ecosystem. Our data centers, strategically located throughout Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa, house the servers that store and process credit information for 62% of the upper Midwest's financial institutions. Our algorithmic networks provide the real-time credit assessment capabilities that enable instant loan decisions, mortgage pre-approvals, and employment background checks that can transform family economic trajectories within minutes of application submission. Our cybersecurity protocols protect consumer financial data worth hundreds of billions of dollars from identity theft, corporate espionage, and foreign government interference that targets American financial institutions for economic intelligence and systematic market manipulation, designed to destabilize local communities and regional economic development that could challenge international competitors' market dominance. The daily routine that Daniel observes during his visits reinforces his assumptions about my limited capabilities and complete financial dependence on family assistance. He sees me expressing gratitude for the $600 monthly allowance that he and Jessica provide for my living expenses, money I could earn in interest payments during the time it takes to brew a pot of coffee. He watches me struggle with smartphone functions that seem obvious to any competent adult, not realizing that my apparent confusion about basic technology represents a carefully choreographed performance designed to maintain my cover identity. What Daniel doesn't see are the 5 a.m. video conferences with development teams in Chicago, Kansas City, Denver, and Atlanta, where I coordinate financial services projects that will influence how millions of Americans access credit and build wealth over the next decade. He doesn't witness the strategic planning sessions that happen after he leaves, where I analyze economic intelligence reports that predict which communities will prosper, which will struggle, which represent investment opportunities that could provide Pinnacle Credit Solutions with crucial market positions or demographic insights. He's never observed the private consultations where I coordinate major financial services acquisitions worth hundreds of millions of dollars, regulatory compliance agreements that create new industry standards, and infrastructure investments that determine whether emerging technologies like blockchain lending, artificial intelligence risk assessment, and sustainable finance systems develop as tools for community empowerment or corporate profit maximization without regard for consumer protection and family economic stability. The relationships I've developed with Federal Reserve governors, state banking commissioners, and international economic leaders over 28 years of strategic networking remain completely invisible to Daniel, who assumes that my social interactions consist primarily of small talk with elderly neighbors and occasional conversations with librarians about book recommendations and community potluck dinner planning. He has no idea that my contact list includes Nobel Prize-winning economists, Fortune 500 banking executives, regulatory officials from 6 states, and the principal investigators for research projects that will determine how financial technology shapes American family economics for the next 50 years. This brings me to the painful irony of my son Daniel's situation. For the past 8 years, Daniel has been building his reputation as a successful regional sales manager for Midwest Agricultural Solutions, earning recognition for his customer relationship management and regional territory development that helps family farms access affordable equipment finance, seasonal operating loans, through partnerships with local banks and credit unions that enable small agricultural operations to compete with large corporate farming enterprises. His success in expanding the company's market share throughout Minnesota and Wisconsin, maintaining customer satisfaction ratings above 90%, and developing innovative financing partnerships that help beginning farmers access land and equipment, has been attributed to his people skills, business acumen, and natural understanding of rural economic needs that established agricultural companies have overlooked due to their focus on large commercial operations rather than family farming innovation. What Daniel has never understood is that his rapid advancement from entry-level agricultural sales representative to regional manager with $1,000 annual salary and profit-sharing benefits reflects the kind of infrastructure support and strategic access that I've been coordinating through Pinnacle Credit Solutions agricultural lending programs. The credit approvals that seem to offer his customers unusually favorable interest rates, flexible repayment terms weren't the result of competitive market conditions. They were carefully calibrated assistance designed to enable promising agricultural entrepreneurs to focus on farming innovation rather than struggling with financing obstacles that destroy most family farming operations before they achieve sustainable profitability. The financing programs that provided Daniel's customers with equipment loans, land purchases, and seasonal operating credit that would normally require extensive collateral and multi-year approval processes were available through agricultural development partnerships that Daniel assumed represented standard industry practices for supporting rural economic development. In reality, these partnerships were coordinated through Pinnacle Credit Solutions' Agricultural Finance Division, which identifies promising farmers and provides strategic credit support that enables rapid agricultural development and market entry, while maintaining the farmer's belief that their success reflects individual capability rather than institutional assistance. But perhaps the most devastating aspect of Daniel's situation is his complete ignorance of these support systems, combined with his assumption that elderly family members exist primarily to provide grateful appreciation for basic financial assistance, rather than recognizing that sometimes people you dismiss as financial burdens might actually be the invisible foundations supporting everything you think you've achieved through your own business skills and hard work. The sophisticated technology infrastructure hidden throughout my modest Powderhorn duplex represents 28 years of systematic development designed to maintain complete operational effectiveness while protecting my privacy and enabling the kind of long-term strategic planning that requires absolute separation between my public identity as a confused retiree and my professional role as chief executive of one of America's most influential consumer credit organizations. The basement command center that I access through Harold's old Craftsman toolbox contains processing capabilities that exceed what most regional Federal Reserve banks use for their daily operations. The quantum-encrypted servers disguised as standard home utility equipment that any Minnesota duplex would require for heating and cooling process over 2.3 million individual credit transactions daily, while maintaining real-time communication with financial institutions across 14 states and coordination with Federal Reserve monetary policy systems that determine national lending standards and consumer credit availability. The holographic display system that emerges from what appears to be Harold's old workbench provides three-dimensional visualization of economic data flows, consumer spending pattern, and credit risk assessments that enable me to identify emerging financial trends 18 months before they become apparent to traditional banking analysts. The system's ability to model complex economic scenarios, including regional unemployment impacts, housing market fluctuation, and agricultural commodity price changes, gives Pinnacle Credit Solutions strategic advantages worth billions of dollars in predictive lending decisions and risk management protocol. The biometric security systems protecting my operations center include retinal scanning, voice recognition, and DNA analysis capabilities that government intelligence agencies use for their most classified financial intelligence operations. The emergency protocols embedded throughout my duplex can initiate complete data destruction and facility evacuation within 45 seconds if unauthorized access is detected, while simultaneously transferring all operational control to backup command centers in Des Moines, Milwaukee, and Fargo that maintain identical capabilities and can assume full corporate leadership without interrupting credit processing for our 18 million active consumer accounts. But perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of my technological infrastructure is the AI-powered character assessment system that monitors family relationship dynamics, community involvement pattern, and intergenerational respect indicators as primary predictors of long-term financial responsibility and creditworthiness. This system, which I personally designed after observing how traditional credit scoring models failed to predict which borrowers would honor their commitments during economic stress, analyzes social media interactions, community volunteer records, elderly care decisions, and family financial support patterns to create comprehensive character profiles that determine eligibility for premium credit products and mortgage opportunities. Pinnacle Credit Solutions operates as a vertically integrated financial services conglomerate that controls every aspect of consumer credit assessment, from initial loan applications through long-term debt management and credit rehabilitation services. Our corporate structure, carefully designed to maintain both operational efficiency and regulatory compliance across multiple state jurisdictions, includes 17 subsidiary companies that provide specialized services to community banks, credit unions, agricultural lending, and consumer finance organizations throughout the Upper Midwest and Great Plains region. Our primary data processing division, Pinnacle Credit Analytics, houses the algorithmic infrastructure that enables over 4,300 community financial institutions to compete with national banking corporations by accessing enterprise-level risk assessment capabilities at affordable subscription rates. The predictive models that we've developed over 2 decades of consumer behavior analysis can identify potential loan defaults with 97% accuracy, while simultaneously recognizing creditworthy applicants who traditional scoring methods would incorrectly classify as high-risk due to limited credit history or non-traditional income sources. The machine learning algorithms that power our credit assessment systems process over 47 different data categories, including traditional financial metrics like payment history and debt-to-income ratio, but also incorporating character indicators that banks have never systematically evaluated: consistency in elderly parent care, reliability and community volunteer commitments,
honesty and family financial discussion, demonstration of intergenerational respect that predicts long-term moral decision-making under financial pressure. Our mortgage risk evaluation division, Pinnacle Housing Solutions, has revolutionized how lenders assess home loan applications by incorporating neighborhood stability factors, family support network strength, and community investment patterns that traditional underwriting processes ignore. Our proprietary algorithms can predict which families will successfully maintain homeownership through economic downturns by analyzing character patterns that indicate resilience, responsibility, and community commitment that sustain mortgage payments even during temporary income disruption.
The agricultural lending expertise that has made Pinnacle Credit Solutions indispensable to rural banks throughout Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and the Dakotas reflects my personal understanding of farming family dynamics and the character traits that determine which agricultural operations survive multi-generational transitions. Our specialized algorithms for evaluating farm loans incorporate weather pattern analysis, commodity market prediction, and family succession planning assessment that enables beginning farmers to access land and equipment financing that would otherwise be impossible to obtain through traditional agricultural lending criteria. But the most strategically important aspect of our operations is the consumer debt rehabilitation network that helps families recover from financial disasters while building the character development and community connections necessary for long-term economic stability. Our debt counseling programs, offered through partnerships with over 800 community organizations across the Upper Midwest, combine traditional financial education with character development training that addresses the underlying behavioral patterns and relationship dynamics that create systematic financial instability for millions of American families. The relationships I've developed with Federal Reserve official state banking commissioners and congressional committee members responsible for financial services legislation over 28 years of strategic networking provide Pinnacle Credit Solutions with policy influence that shapes national credit standards and consumer protection regulation. My quarterly consultations with Federal Reserve governors in Minneapolis and Chicago ensure that our algorithmic innovations remain compliant with evolving monetary policy, while influencing the development of new regulatory frameworks for artificial intelligence in financial services. The policy recommendations that I provide to state banking commissioners throughout the Upper Midwest region have been incorporated into legislation that protects consumer privacy while enabling responsible innovation in credit assessment technologies. My testimony before congressional subcommittees on banking and financial services has influenced federal regulations that require character assessment disclosure in consumer lending, while preventing discriminatory practices that could exclude qualified borrowers based on demographic characteristics rather than demonstrate creditworthiness and moral reliability. The strategic intelligence capabilities that I coordinate through partnerships with Department of Treasury financial crimes enforcement networks enable Pinnacle Credit Solutions to identify and prevent systematic credit fraud, identity theft, and international economic manipulation that targets American consumer credit systems. Our cybersecurity protocols, developed in coordination with National Security Agency Financial Intelligence Division, protect consumer data from foreign government interference, while providing real-time threat assessment that helps community banks maintain operational security without investing millions of dollars in specialized defensive infrastructure. The academic research partnerships that I maintain with economics departments at University of Minnesota, University of Wisconsin, Iowa State University, and North Dakota State University provide theoretical foundations for our practical innovations in character-based credit assessment. The graduate students and faculty researchers who contribute to our algorithmic development through university consulting agreements have no idea that their work contributes to a privately owned financial services empire, believing instead that they're participating in academic research projects funded by anonymous foundation grants. The agricultural lending expertise that has made Daniel's career success possible operates through a sophisticated network of rural banks, farm credit associations, and equipment financing companies that rely on Pinnacle Credit Solutions' specialized algorithms for evaluating agricultural loan applications. Our proprietary risk assessment models incorporate weather pattern analysis, soil quality data, commodity market predictions, and multi-generational family farming history to provide financing decisions that traditional banking criteria cannot adequately evaluate. The beginning farmer loan programs that Daniel's customers access through Midwest Agricultural Solutions reflect partnerships between Pinnacle Credit Solutions and the USDA Farm Service Agency that enable qualified young farmers to purchase land and equipment with minimal down payments and favorable interest rates. Our character assessment protocols ensure that these opportunities reach families who demonstrate the intergenerational respect, community involvement, and moral responsibility necessary for successful long-term agricultural operations that contribute to rural economic development and food security. The seasonal operating loans that help family farms manage cash flow challenges during planting and growing seasons are structured through credit lines that adjust automatically based on weather conditions, commodity prices, and regional economic factors that our algorithms predict with remarkable accuracy. This innovative approach to agricultural finance has reduced farm loan defaults by 63%, while enabling small farming operations to expand production and adopt sustainable agricultural practices that improve long-term soil health and environmental protection. The equipment financing programs that Daniel coordinates through his regional sales territory utilize Pinnacle Credit Solutions, specialized algorithms that evaluate equipment utilization patterns, maintenance history, and operational efficiency metrics to provide farmers with affordable access to modern agricultural technology that increases productivity while reducing environmental impact. Our partnerships with equipment manufacturers enable family farms to adopt precision agriculture techniques that were previously available only to large corporate farming operations with substantial capital resources. Property from retiring agricultural families incorporates succession planning services that help multi-generational farming operations transition ownership while maintaining family connections to agricultural heritage and rural community involvement. Our specialized land loan products include mentorship programs that connect experienced farmers with beginning operators, creating support networks that increase success rates while preserving agricultural knowledge and community traditions. The community development programs that I coordinate through Pinnacle Credit Solutions extend far beyond traditional financial services to include comprehensive family support systems that address the underlying social and economic factors that create systematic financial instability for working-class families throughout the Upper Midwest region. Our community partnership network includes over 400 nonprofit organizations, religious institutions, and civic groups that provide integrated services combining financial counseling with character development, family relationship support, and community engagement opportunity. The debt rehabilitation programs that help families recover from financial disasters incorporate character development training that addresses the behavioral patterns and relationship dynamics that create recurring financial crises. Our counselors, trained in both financial planning and family systems therapy, help participants identify and modify the attitudes toward money, family obligations, and community responsibility that determine long-term economic stability beyond temporary income fluctuations or unexpected expenses. The homeownership preparation programs that we offer through partnerships with community development corporations include comprehensive education about mortgage responsibilities, neighborhood, investment strategy, and the character traits that enable families to maintain homeownership through economic challenges. Our specialized curriculum addresses intergenerational wealth building, family financial communication, and community involvement patterns that create support networks capable of providing assistance during temporary hardships. The small business development services that Pinnacle Credit Solutions provides through partnerships with regional economic development organizations include character-based evaluation criteria that identify entrepreneurs whose personal values and community commitment predict business success beyond traditional financial projections and market analysis. Our business loan programs incorporate mentorship components that connect beginning entrepreneurs with established business leaders who provide guidance and support that increases success rates while building community economic network. The educational financing programs that help working-class families access higher education opportunities incorporate character assessment criteria that identify students whose family values and community involvement predict academic success and post-graduation community contribution. Specialized student loan products include community service requirements and rural return commitments that encourage educated young adults to contribute their skills to small-town economic development, rather than migrating to urban areas where their talents provide no benefit to the community that supported their educational advancement. The character evaluation systems that determine credit eligibility for Pinnacle Credit Solutions premium lending products represent the most sophisticated moral assessment technology ever developed for financial services application. Our algorithms analyze over 150 behavioral indicators that predict long-term financial responsibility, including family relationship patterns, community volunteer consistency, elderly parent care decisions, religious or ethical commitment, demonstration, and intergenerational respect patterns that indicate character stability under economic pressure. The family relationship assessment components of our character evaluation system monitor social media interactions, family financial support patterns, and elderly care decisions to identify individuals whose treatment of vulnerable family members predicts their likely behavior toward financial obligations and community responsibility. Applicants who demonstrate systematic disrespect for elderly relatives, exploitation of family financial relationships, or abandonment of intergenerational support obligations are automatically disqualified from premium credit products regardless of their income levels or traditional credit score. The community involvement evaluation criteria assess volunteer service consistency, religious or civic organization participation, and local economic support patterns that indicate commitment to community welfare beyond individual financial advancement. Our algorithms recognize that individuals who demonstrate genuine community investment and social responsibility are statistically more likely to honor financial commitments and maintain stable employment patterns that enable reliable loan repayment even during economic difficulty. The intergenerational respect assessment protocols evaluate how credit applicants treat elderly family members, support aging parents, and demonstrate appreciation for generational wisdom and experience that indicates character maturity and moral development. These evaluations, based on 28 years of empirical research correlating family relationship patterns with financial responsibility, provide more accurate predictions of long-term creditworthiness than traditional metrics focused solely on income and payment history. The moral consistency evaluation components analyze behavior patterns across multiple life domains to identify individuals whose character demonstrates the stability and reliability necessary for major financial commitments like mortgages, business loans, and educational financing that could affect family economic security for decades. Applicants whose behavior demonstrates systematic moral flexibility, exploitation of vulnerable relations, to prioritization of personal advancement over family and community obligations, receive credit restrictions that protect both lenders and the applicants themselves from financial commitments they lack the character foundation to sustain. The Twin Cities metropolitan area operations that I coordinate from my Powderhorn duplex include partnerships with over 200 community banks, credit unions, and consumer lending organizations that serve families throughout Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the surrounding suburban community. Our regional algorithms incorporate local economic factors, neighborhood development patterns, and community stability indicators that enable more accurate credit assessments than national banking models that ignore regional variations in employment patterns, housing market, and cultural factors that influence financial behavior. The Greater Minnesota operations that extend throughout rural communities across the state utilize specialized algorithms designed for agricultural economics, small-town business development, and the unique financial challenges facing families in communities with populations under 10. Our rural lending expertise recognizes that traditional credit scoring models developed for urban markets systematically discriminate against qualified rural borrowers whose income patterns, collateral resources, and community support networks operate differently from metropolitan financial norms. The Iron Range Economic Development Programs that Pinnacle Credit Solutions coordinates with mining communities throughout northeastern Minnesota include specialized lending products for families transitioning from traditional mining employment to diversified economic opportunities in tourism, forestry, and renewable energy development. Our community partnership initiatives help mining families access retraining programs, small business development resources, and homeownership opportunities that enable economic transition while maintaining family connections to regional heritage and community traditions. The metropolitan area immigrant community services that we provide through partnerships with cultural organizations and religious institutions include specialized financial education programs designed for families whose previous economic experience in other countries requires adaptation to American banking system, credit building processes, and homeownership opportunity. Our multicultural lending specialists understand the character assessment challenges facing immigrant families whose community involvement and family support patterns may not be immediately apparent to traditional credit evaluation systems. The university community programs that serve families associated with University of Minnesota, Carleton College, St. Olaf College, and other regional educational institutions include specialized lending products for faculties and graduate students whose income patterns and career trajectories require flexible credit assessment criteria that recognize educational achievement and community contribution potential beyond traditional employment verification and debt-to-income calculation. The artificial intelligence research that drives Pinnacle Credit Solutions' continued innovation in character-based credit assessment includes partnerships with technology companies, university research departments, and government laboratories that develop increasingly sophisticated methods for evaluating moral character and predicting long-term financial responsibility. Our machine learning algorithms continue evolving as we process millions of credit decisions and track the long-term outcomes that validate or challenge our character assessment methodology. The blockchain technology applications that we're developing for secure character verification include distributed ledger systems that enable community organizations, religious institutions, and civic groups to provide verified character references that cannot be falsified or manipulated by credit applicants seeking to misrepresent their community involvement or family relationship pattern. These technological innovations will revolutionize how financial institutions evaluate character while protecting consumer privacy and preventing discriminatory practices. The predictive modeling capabilities that our quantum computing systems enable include scenario analysis for regional economic development, climate change impacts on agricultural land, and demographic transition effects on community banking that help our partner financial institutions prepare for economic changes that could affect their lending portfolios and community development initiatives. Our strategic planning algorithms provide community banks with competitive advantages that enable them to serve local families more effectively than national banking corporations, whose standardized products ignore regional needs and cultural factors. The cybersecurity innovations that protect Pinnacle Credit Solutions operations from international interference, corporate espionage, and criminal exploitation include partnerships with federal law enforcement agencies and intelligence organizations that recognize the national security implications of foreign manipulation of American consumer credit systems. Our defensive capabilities protect not only our own operations but also the community banks and credit unions that rely on our infrastructure for their daily operations and member services. This comprehensive technological and operational infrastructure that I've built over 28 years' strategic development has created the perfect foundation for demonstrating to Daniel and his family exactly what happens when people who depend entirely on hidden support systems decide that elderly family members are expendable burdens rather than recognizing them as the foundations, everything they think they've achieved through individual capability and personal merit.
The relationship between Daniel and me that would eventually deteriorate into the cruel abandonment in the Walmart parking lot had begun with genuine love, mutual respect, and the kind of intergenerational bond that creates lasting family strength and character development. During Daniel's childhood in the 1990s, when Harold was still alive and our modest Minneapolis home served as the gathering place for extended family celebrations, Daniel would spend entire summer weeks with us, learning the values of hard work, community service, and respect for elderly wisdom that I had hoped would guide his character development throughout his adult life. Those early summers were filled with projects that taught Daniel practical skills while building our relationship through shared accomplishments and genuine collaboration. Harold would involve Daniel in home maintenance projects, painting the garage, repairing the back fence, organizing the basement workshop, while I taught him basic cooking skills, gardening techniques, and the importance of maintaining family traditions that connected current generations to their cultural heritage and community roots. Daniel's eager participation in these activities, his respectful questions about family history, and his genuine appreciation for the time we invested in his development, created memories that made his eventual transformation into someone who viewed elderly family members as financial burdens rather than sources of wisdom and support particularly devastating to witness. The conversations we shared during those formative years revealed Daniel's natural intelligence, his curiosity about how businesses operated, and his genuine interest in understanding the economic principles that determined which families prospered and which struggled with financial instability. When Daniel was 12 years old, he would sit at our kitchen table while I balanced the household budget, asking thoughtful questions about interest rates, savings accounts, and the banking systems that helped families build wealth over time. His questions demonstrated authentic intellectual curiosity rather than the superficial engagement that adults often display when humoring elderly relatives' attempts to share knowledge and life experience. The family values that Harold and I tried to instill during Daniel's childhood emphasized the importance of intergenerational support, community involvement, and the kind of character development that enables people to succeed professionally while maintaining their moral foundation and family loyalty. We taught Daniel that true success required balancing personal achievement with family responsibility, that elderly wisdom deserved respect and consideration, and that financial prosperity created obligations to support family members and contribute to community welfare rather than simply accumulating material possessions and social status. The educational support that Harold and I provided during Daniel's elementary and middle school years included homework assistance, transportation to extracurricular activities, and the kind of consistent encouragement that helps children develop confidence and academic ambition. When Daniel struggled with mathematics in 7th grade, I spent countless hours helping him understand basic financial concepts, using practical examples from household budgeting and small business operations to make abstract mathematical principles relevant to real-world applications that he could comprehend and appreciate. The character development lessons that we emphasized during Daniel's teenage years focused on the importance of treating all people with respect regardless of their age, economic status, or apparent social value. We taught Daniel that elderly people deserved special consideration and care, that family obligations took precedence over social opportunities, and that true maturity required recognizing the difference between temporary and convenience and genuine hardship that justified modifying plans to provide family assistance and emotional support. Daniel's undergraduate experience at the University of Minnesota marked the beginning of subtle but significant changes in his attitude toward family relationships and traditional values. His business administration coursework, combined with exposure to contemporary management theories and competitive career preparation, gradually convinced him that efficiency and optimization should determine personal relationships just as they guided professional decision-making and strategic planning. The internship experiences that Daniel pursued during his junior and senior years introduced him to corporate environments where success was measured primarily through individual achievement, quarterly performance metrics, and advancement up organizational hierarchies that rewarded personal ambition over collaborative contribution and community involvement. The mentors he encountered in these professional settings consistently emphasized the importance of strategic networking, resource allocation, a kind of calculated relationship management that treated personal connections as career development tools rather than sources of mutual support and emotional fulfillment. The academic theories that Daniel absorbed during his business program included economic models that prioritized efficiency over equity, optimization over stability, and individual advancement over community welfare and intergenerational support. His professors, many of whom had limited experience with family businesses or community-based economics, taught Daniel to evaluate every relationship and commitment according to measurable return on investment and opportunity cost calculations that systematically undervalued the contributions that elderly family members provide through wisdom, emotional support, and institutional memory. The social environment at the University of Minnesota during Daniel's college years reinforced competitive individualism and material success as primary indicators of personal worth and life achievement. His class, many of whom came from upper-middle-class families with substantial financial resources, shared assumptions about elderly care that emphasized professional services over family involvement, institutional solutions over personal responsibility, and financial efficiency over emotional connection and intergenerational respect. But perhaps the most damaging aspect of Daniel's college experience was his systematic misunderstanding of the support systems that enabled his educational success and career preparation. The scholarships that reduced his student loan debt, the internship opportunities that provided practical experience and professional networking, and the career placement services that connected him with promising employment opportunities all reflected careful coordination through Pinnacle Credit Solutions educational development programs, though Daniel interpreted this support as evidence of his individual merit and academic achievement. The leadership positions that Daniel earned in student organizations, treasurer of the Business Students Association, vice president of the Agricultural Economics Club, coordinator for the Career Development Workshop Series, weren't simply the result of his personal qualifications and interpersonal skills, they were strategic opportunities facilitated through Pinnacle Credit Solutions, University Partnership Program, designed to provide promising students with the social capital and professional experience necessary for successful career development, while maintaining their belief that success reflected individual capability and competitive advantage. The networking events that Daniel attended during his senior year, where he met industry professionals who would later influence his career advancement, weren't coincidental encounters that demonstrated his initiative and professional preparation. They were carefully coordinated introductions facilitated through Pinnacle Credit Solutions Professional Development Network, designed to provide qualified graduates with the social connections necessary for successful career launch while building relationships that could benefit both the graduates and the community organizations that had supported their development. Daniel's employment with Midwest Agricultural Solutions immediately after college graduation marked the acceleration of his transformation from a respectful young man who valued family relationships into someone who viewed elderly relatives as obligations that interfered with professional advancement and social mobility. The agricultural sales position that seemed perfectly suited to his educational background and personal interests reflected strategic coordination through Pinnacle Credit Solutions' Rural Economic Development Initiative. Though Daniel's interpretation of this opportunity as validation of his individual capabilities prevented him from recognizing the institutional support that had created his career path, the training programs that developed Daniel's expertise in agricultural financing, customer relationship management, and regional market analysis weren't standard company offerings available to all new employees. They were specialized development opportunities coordinated through Pinnacle Credit Solutions' Agricultural Lending Network, designed to provide promising sales professionals with the knowledge and skills necessary for successful rural business development, while building expertise that would benefit both individual careers and regional economic growth. The customer relationships that enabled Daniel's rapid advance from entry-level sales representative to regional territory manager reflected systematic introductions to family farmers and agricultural businesses whose financing needs were coordinated through Pinnacle Credit Solutions, community banking partnerships. The trust and respect that Daniel earned from rural customers wasn't simply the result of his personal charm and business acumen, it reflected the carefully managed credit approval processes and favorable financing terms that made his customers successful while building their appreciation for his professional services and agricultural expertise. The recognition that Daniel received within Midwest Agricultural Solutions for outstanding sales performance and customer satisfaction achievements was based on territory results that reflected Pinnacle Credit Solutions' strategic support for rural economic development, rather than superior individual performance compared to sales representatives working in regions without access to our specialized agricultural financing program. Daniel's assumption that his success demonstrated personal capability and competitive advantage prevented him from understanding how integrated support systems had created his professional achievement.
The salary increases and performance bonuses that enabled Daniel to purchase his suburban home, upgrade his vehicle, and build substantial savings accounts were possible because his sales commissions reflected customer success that depended on Pinnacle Credit Solutions' favorable financing terms and credit approval processes that increased agricultural equipment purchases and land acquisition activities throughout his territory. The financial prosperity that Daniel achieved during his first 5 years with Midwest Agricultural Solutions created the material foundation for the life expectations and social aspirations that would eventually corrupt his understanding of family relationships and intergenerational obligations. But perhaps the most damaging aspect of Daniel's career success was how it reinforced his growing conviction that professional achievement reflects individual merit and business expertise, rather than recognizing the community's support systems and institutional assistance that had enabled his advancement. His assumption that elderly family members couldn't understand or contribute to modern business operations prevented him from recognizing that his success depended entirely on financial infrastructure developed and maintained by the grandmother, whose technological confusion and financial limitations he increasingly dismissed with impatience and condescension. Daniel's marriage to Jessica Martinez in 2019 created a partnership that reinforced and amplified the problematic attitudes toward elderly family members and intergenerational obligations that had been developing throughout his professional career. Jessica's background as a registered nurse at Fairview Southdale Hospital provided her with professional expertise in medical care and elderly health management, but her clinical training had emphasized institutional solutions and professional services over family caregiving and intergenerational support that honored elderly autonomy and community connection. The conversations between Daniel and Jessica about family financial responsibilities revealed a shared worldview that prioritized efficiency, professional optimization, and measurable outcomes over relationships, tradition, and the unmeasurable contributions that elderly family members provide through emotional support, historical perspective, and institutional memory. Jessica's medical training in geriatric care had focused on managing elderly patients as clinical problems requiring professional intervention, rather than recognizing elderly people as individuals with continuing autonomy, community connection, and family relationships that deserved respect and support. Jessica's influence on Daniel's thinking about elderly care responsibilities was particularly damaging because her professional credibility provided seemingly authoritative validation for attitudes that prioritized convenience, cost-effectiveness, over family loyalty and intergenerational respect. Her suggestions about optimizing elderly care through professional services, assisted living arrangement, and medical management systems consistently reinforced Daniel's growing impatience with the time and emotional energy required for family relationships that didn't produce measurable benefits or advance professional objectives. The financial planning discussions between Daniel and Jessica revealed systematic calculation about elderly care obligations that treated family support as budgetary line items, rather than expressions of love and respect. Their conversations about my supposed financial needs and declining independence were characterized by the same analytical approach they applied to insurance decisions and investment planning, demonstrating how thoroughly their professional training in efficiency and resource allocation had corrupted their understanding of human relationships and family responsibility. The social activities that Daniel and Jessica pursued together consistently excluded elderly family members and focused on professional networking, career development, lifestyle experiences that reinforced their identification with successful young professionals rather than multi-generational family systems that valued wisdom and experience alongside innovation and ambition. Their friend groups consisted primarily of other couples who shared their assumptions about elderly care as professional responsibility rather than family opportunity and who validated their prioritization of career advancement over family obligation. The home purchasing decisions that Daniel and Jessica made in 2020 reflected their assumption that financial resources should be allocated toward lifestyle enhancement and social status rather than building multi-generational family stability and support systems. Their suburban Edina home, with its modern amenities and professional landscape, demonstrated their commitment to material success and social positioning, rather than the kind of community integration and family accessibility that would have enabled them to provide meaningful support for elderly relatives while maintaining their own career aspirations. The gradual changes in Daniel's behavior toward me during family gatherings and social occasions revealed his systematic adoption of attitudes that treated elderly family members as obligations to manage rather than relationships to nurture and maintain. His conversations with me became increasingly focused on practical concerns, my health status, financial management, and housing arrangements, rather than the kind of personal sharing and emotional connection that had characterized our relationship during his childhood and early adult. The impatience that Daniel began displaying when I asked questions about technology, requested assistance with unfamiliar systems, or needed clarification about complex financial documents, reflected his growing assumption that elderly confusion represented intellectual limitation rather than normal adaptation challenges that required patience and respect. His tendency to provide abbreviated explanations and simplified instructions demonstrated his belief that elderly people lacked the capability to understand sophisticated concepts, rather than recognizing that unfamiliarity with new systems required thorough explanation and supportive assistance. The holiday gatherings and family celebrations where Daniel's changed attitudes became most apparent revealed his systematic approach to minimizing time spent with elderly relatives while maximizing efficiency and convenience for his own schedule and priority. His suggestions about simplifying family traditions, reducing gathering frequency, and delegating elderly care responsibilities to professional services consistently prioritized his convenience over family connection and intergenerational bonding that had previously provided meaning and stability for our extended family relation. The financial discussions where Daniel offered to help me understand modern banking systems, investment options, and estate planning decisions revealed his comfortable assumption that elderly people required guidance and supervision, rather than recognizing that my occasionally expressed confusion about rapidly changing technology represented strategic performance rather than genuine incompetence. His condescending explanations of financial concepts that I had been managing professionally for decades demonstrated how completely his assumptions about elderly limitations had prevented him from recognizing my actual capabilities and expertise. The transportation arrangements and shopping assistance that Daniel provided during my supposed times of need reflected his systematic approach to elderly care as problem-solving rather than relationship building. His efficient completion of errands and medical appointment coordination demonstrated his commitment to fulfilling obligations while minimizing personal involvement and emotional engagement that might have revealed the continuing wisdom and capability that elderly family members possess, despite their need for occasional practical assistance. The suburban Edina community where Daniel and Jessica established their married life provided social reinforcement for attitudes toward elderly care that emphasized professional services, institutional solutions, and family convenience over intergenerational support and community integration. Their neighbors, many of whom were dual-career couples with substantial disposable income, shared assumptions about elderly care that prioritized efficiency and expertise over family involvement and emotional connection. The community values that characterized Daniel's suburban social environment consistently emphasized individual achievement, material success, and lifestyle optimization over traditional priorities like family loyalty, community service, and intergenerational support that honored wisdom and experience alongside innovation and ambition. The social expectations within their neighborhood reinforced competitive individualism and professional advancement as primary indicators of personal worth, while systematically devaluing the contributions that elderly community members provide through volunteer service, institutional memory, and cultural preservation. The parenting philosophies that Daniel and Jessica adopted for their daughters, Emma and Sophie, reflected their assumption that children should be protected from the inconveniences and emotional complications associated with elderly care responsibilities. Their decision to limit the girls' exposure to my supposed health problems and financial limitations demonstrated their belief that intergenerational relationships should be managed to maximize childhood convenience rather than building the character development and family loyalty that comes from participating multi-generational family support systems. The educational choices that Daniel and Jessica made for their daughters emphasized academic achievement, extracurricular excellence, and college preparation that would enable professional success, rather than character development, community service, and the kind of moral education that builds respect for elderly wisdom and family obligation. Their investment in private lessons, competitive sports, and advanced academic programs consistently prioritized individual advancement over community involvement and family responsibility that would have taught their daughters about intergenerational support and elderly respect. The vacation planning and leisure activities that Daniel's family pursued together consistently excluded elderly family members and focused on experiences that reinforced their identification with successful professional families rather than multi-generational family systems. Their trips to resort destinations, professional conference locations, and lifestyle experiences that catered to affluent families demonstrated their commitment to material enjoyment and social status, rather than building family relationships and community connections that include elderly members as valued participants, rather than burdensome obligations. The emergency board meeting that I attended on December 24, 2024, while Daniel assumed I was conducting another confused shopping expedition that would probably result in purchasing inappropriate gifts and spending money on unnecessary items, was actually one of the most consequential strategic planning sessions in Pinnacle Credit Solutions' 28-year history. The executive committee had gathered in our Minneapolis headquarters to finalize the implementation of enhanced character assessment protocols that would revolutionize how financial institutions throughout the upper Midwest evaluated creditworthiness and determined access to premium lending products. The agenda for our Christmas Eve session included final approval of algorithmic modifications that would incorporate family relationship assessment as a primary factor in credit decisions, expansion of community involvement, verification requirements for mortgage application, and implementation of intergenerational respect monitoring systems that would identify credit applicants whose treatment of elderly family members predicted their likelihood of honoring financial obligations during economic stress or personal difficulty. The policy changes that we approved during this meeting would affect over 18 million consumer credit accounts throughout Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, the Dakotas, and northern Illinois, with particular impact on families whose character assessment scores indicated systematic disrespect for elderly relatives, exploitation of family financial relationships, or abandonment of intergenerational support obligations that predicted unreliability in mortgage payment, business loan commitments, and educational financing responsibilities. The specific case studies that I presented to support our enhanced character assessment criteria included detailed analysis of correlation patterns between elderly care decisions and long-term financial responsibility, demonstrating that individuals who demonstrated patience, respect, and genuine care for aging family members were statistically more likely to honor major financial commitments, even during economic downturns or personal emergencies that created pressure to default on loan obligations. But the most significant decision that our board approved was the implementation of real-time character monitoring systems that would track changes in family relationship patterns, community involvement level, and elderly care decisions to identify credit account holders whose deteriorating character indicated increased default risk that justified credit line reductions, interest rate adjustment, and loan acceleration procedures designed to protect both institutional investments and the borrowers themselves from financial commitments they lacked the moral foundation to sustain. As I drove home from our downtown Minneapolis headquarters, through the Christmas Eve snowfall that was beginning to accumulate on city streets and create the hazardous driving conditions that would soon play a crucial role in exposing Daniel's true character, I felt optimistic about implementing systems that could protect elderly community members from family exploitation while ensuring that access to credit and financial opportunities remained connected to character development and intergenerational respect that honored wisdom and experience alongside innovation and ambition. The irony that Daniel was about to demonstrate exactly the kind of character failure that our new assessment protocols were designed to identify and penalize would soon provide the perfect real-world test case for systems that could transform comfortable assumptions about elderly vulnerability, devastating lessons about family respect, and the consequences that follow when professional success develops without the character foundation necessary for sustainable community relationships and intergenerational support. The systematic support network that had enabled Daniel's remarkable career advancement from entry-level agricultural sales representative to regional territory manager with a year's annual salary operated through such sophisticated coordination between Pinnacle Credit Solutions and the agricultural lending ecosystem that even experienced industry professionals would have difficulty recognizing the institutional assistance that made his success possible. The favorable financing terms that Daniel's customers consistently received for equipment purchases, land acquisition, and seasonal operating loans weren't the result of competitive market conditions or his exceptional sales skills. They were carefully calibrated assistance designed to enable both individual farmer success and regional sales representative advance. The beginning farmer loan programs that provided Daniel's youngest customers with access to land and equipment financing that would normally require substantial down payments and multi-year credit verification reflected partnerships between Pinnacle Credit Solutions, the USDA Farm Service Agency, and regional banks that had been specifically designed to support agricultural economic development in Daniel's territory. These specialized financing products, which offered interest rates 2 to 3 percentage points below market standards and repayment terms that adjusted automatically based on commodity prices and weather conditions, created customer loyalty and purchasing volume that made Daniel appear to be an exceptionally effective sales professional. The equipment financing algorithms that determined approval decisions for Daniel's customers incorporated Pinnacle Credit Solutions' proprietary character assessment protocols that evaluated farming family dynamics, intergenerational succession plan, and community involvement patterns to identify agricultural operations with the highest probability of long-term success. The farmers who received immediate approval for equipment purchases through Midwest Agricultural Solutions weren't simply those with the strongest traditional credit profiles. They were operations whose character assessment scores indicated reliability, community commitment, and the kind of moral foundation that predicted sustainable agricultural practices and consistent loan repayment, even during challenging economic periods. The seasonal operating credit lines that helped Daniel's customers manage cash flow during planting and growing seasons utilized Pinnacle Credit Solutions'
sophisticated agricultural risk modeling that incorporated weather pattern analysis, soil quality data, commodity market prediction, and regional economic factors to provide financing decisions within hours rather than the weeks or months typically required for agricultural loan processing. This rapid approval system, which Daniel's customers assumed reflected efficient processing by their local bank, actually depended on real-time data analysis and risk assessment capabilities that Pinnacle Credit Solutions provided as a specialized service to rural financial institutions throughout the upper Midwest. The crop insurance coordination that simplified financing for Daniel's customers reflected partnerships between Pinnacle Credit Solutions and federal agricultural insurance programs that streamlined application processes, reduced paperwork requirements, and provided integrated risk management services that protected both farmers and lenders from weather-related losses and commodity price fluctuations. The comprehensive insurance coverage that Daniel's customers accessed through standard industry partnerships actually represented risk-sharing agreements that enabled more favorable lending terms while protecting agricultural operations from the catastrophic losses that historically destroyed family farming enterprises. The precision agriculture financing that enabled Daniel's customers to adopt GPS-guided equipment, soil testing systems, and variable rate application technology reflected specialized lending products developed through partnerships between Pinnacle Credit Solutions, equipment manufacturers, and agricultural technology companies. These financing programs, which offered extended repayment terms and performance-based interest adjustments, encouraged adoption of sustainable farming practices that improved long-term soil health while increasing short-term productivity and profitability that justified premium equipment investment. The customer relationships that formed the foundation of Daniel's sales success reflected systematic coordination between Pinnacle Credit Solutions, agricultural lending specialist, and the farming families, who became his most loyal and profitable accounts. The trust and respect that Daniel earned from rural customers wasn't simply the result of his personal charm and agricultural knowledge, it reflected the consistently favorable financing experiences that these farmers enjoyed when working with Midwest Agricultural Solutions, compared to competing equipment dealers whose customers faced more restrictive lending criteria and higher financing costs. The referral networks that generated new customer opportunities for Daniel operated through informal communication systems among farming families who shared information about financing experiences, equipment, performance, and dealer relationships during coffee shop conversations, church gatherings, and community events throughout rural Minnesota and Wisconsin. The positive word-of-mouth marketing that drove Daniel's territory expansion reflected customer satisfaction with financing processes that seemed unusually favorable and efficient compared to their previous experiences with agricultural equipment purchases and dealer relationships. The educational seminars and demonstration events that Daniel organized for his customers provided value-added services that enhanced customer loyalty while building his reputation as a knowledgeable and trustworthy agricultural professional. These events, which featured expert presentations on sustainable farming practices, precision agricultural technology, and financial management strategies, were coordinated through Pinnacle Credit Solutions, educational partnerships with University Extension Services, Agricultural Research Center, and industry associations that provided high-quality programming without cost to Daniel or his customer. The customer retention rates that distinguished Daniel's performance from other regional sales representatives reflected the systematic advantages that his customers enjoyed through Pinnacle Credit Solutions, ongoing relationship management, and financial support services. The farmers who purchased equipment through Daniel's territory received priority access to technical support, favorable trade-in valuations, and equipment upgrade financing that created long-term business relationships, extending far beyond individual transaction experience. The territorial boundaries that defined Daniel's sales region had been strategically designed to include farming communities with the highest concentrations of family operations that met Pinnacle Credit Solutions character assessment criteria for premium agricultural lending products. The rural communities within Daniel's territory represented carefully selected populations of farming families whose community involvement, intergenerational succession planning, and moral character indicated exceptional creditworthiness and long-term agricultural sustainability that justified specialized financing support and relationship development. The competitive advantages that enabled Daniel to consistently outperform sales representatives and adjacent territories reflected not just his individual capabilities and customer relationship skills, but the systematic infrastructure support that made his customers more successful, more financially stable, and more capable of investing in equipment, upgrades, and agricultural expansion that generated higher sales volumes and commission income for his professional advancement. The training programs that developed Daniel's expertise in agricultural finance, customer relationship management, and regional market analysis represented significant investments by Midwest Agricultural Solutions in specialized education that most companies couldn't afford to provide for individual sales representatives. The agricultural economics coursework, equipment, technology certification, and customer service training that enhanced Daniel's professional qualifications were subsidized through partnerships with Pinnacle Credit Solutions, educational development initiatives that supported promising agricultural professionals throughout the upper Midwest region. The industry conference attendance that expanded Daniel's professional network and agricultural knowledge reflected corporate education benefits that exceeded what most agricultural equipment companies provided for regional sales staff. The trade show participation, continuing education seminar, and professional association memberships that enhanced Daniel's industry credibility were supported through training budgets that Midwest Agricultural Solutions could afford because of the exceptional sales performance and customer satisfaction results that Daniel achieved through his special territory advantages. The professional certifications that distinguished Daniel's qualifications within the agricultural equipment industry required significant time investment and examination fees that most sales representatives couldn't afford without employer support or personal financial sacrifice. The Certified Agricultural Finance Specialist designation, Precision Agricultural Technology certification, and Customer Relationship Management credentials that enhanced Daniel's professional standing were obtained through educational opportunities that Midwest Agricultural Solutions provided, part of a comprehensive professional development program designed to support high-performing regional representatives. The mentorship relationships that guided Daniel's career advancement connected him with experienced agricultural industry leaders who provided guidance, networking opportunity, and strategic career advice that accelerated his professional development beyond what individual initiative and performance could achieve. These mentoring partnerships, which Daniel assumed reflected his professional potential and interpersonal skill, were actually coordinated through Pinnacle Credit Solutions industry leadership development programs that identified promising agricultural professionals and provided them with strategic support and guidance. The industry recognition that Daniel received for outstanding sales performance and customer satisfaction achievements reflected territorial results that consistently exceeded regional averages and national benchmarks for agricultural equipment sales and customer retention. The awards, performance bonuses, and company recognition that distinguished Daniel's career advancement were based on measurable outcomes that demonstrated exceptional professional capability while concealing the systematic infrastructure support that made these achievements possible. The speaking invitations and industry consultation opportunities that established Daniel's reputation as an agricultural sales expert, provided additional income and professional credibility that enhanced his standing within both his company and the broader agricultural industry. These opportunities, which Daniel interpreted as validation of his individual expertise and market knowledge, reflected the exceptional customer results and territorial performance that attracted attention from industry associations and agricultural business organizations. That Daniel achieved through his agricultural sales career enabled lifestyle improvements and material accumulation that reinforced his family's identification with successful professional families, rather than recognizing their continued dependence on intergenerational support and community assistance. The suburban Adena home that Daniel and Jessica purchased in 2020 for $850,000 represented a significant upgrade from their previous living situation and demonstrated their material success while creating financial obligations that required sustained high income and continued career advancement. The mortgage approval process that enabled Daniel's home purchase reflected credit assessment procedures that evaluated his employment stability, income trajectory, and debt-to-income ratios, according to criteria that favored agricultural sales professionals with strong customer relationships and territorial performance records. The favorable interest rate and loan terms that Daniel received weren't simply the result of competitive mortgage market conditions, they reflected Pinnacle Credit Solutions' specialized lending criteria that recognized agricultural industry employment as particularly stable and creditworthy when supported by strong customer bases and regional market knowledge. The vehicle purchases that Daniel and Jessica made to support their suburban lifestyle and professional image requirements included 2 late-model SUVs with advanced safety features and luxury amenities that reflected their financial confidence and material aspiration. The automotive financing that enabled these purchases utilized specialized lending products designed for professional families with stable employment and growth potential, offering extended warranties and maintenance packages that protected their transportation investments while building long-term customer relationships with automotive dealerships. The educational investments that Daniel and Jessica made for their daughters, Emma and Sophie, included private music lessons, competitive sports participation, academic tutor and enrichment programs that cost thousands of dollars annually, but provided the kind of comprehensive development opportunities that distinguished children from affluent families from those whose parents couldn't afford specialized instruction and skill development. These educational expenses, which Daniel's income could support because of his exceptional sales performance and commission structure, created lifestyle expectations and social connections that reinforced their family's upper-middle-class identity.
The vacation and leisure activities that Daniel's family pursued together reflected their discretionary income and professional flexibility, while consistently excluding elderly family members who might require accommodation or special consideration that would complicate travel planning or reduce destination options. The resort vacations, professional conference trips, and recreational activities that characterized their family lifestyle demonstrated their material success, while systematically minimizing interactions with elderly relatives whose needs might interfere with their leisure preferences and social aspirations. The retirement planning and investment strategies that Daniel and Jessica implemented through professional financial advisors reflected their confidence in continued career advancement and income growth that would enable comfortable retirement and intergenerational wealth building. Their investment portfolios, retirement, account contribution, and insurance coverage demonstrated sophisticated financial planning, while revealing their assumption that professional success would continue without interruption or external dependencies that might affect their long-term financial security. The social position that Daniel and Jessica achieved within their Adena community reflected their professional success, material prosperity, and lifestyle choices while demonstrating their systematic prioritization of peer relationships over intergenerational family connections and elderly support responsibilities. Their neighborhood social activities, school district involvement, and community organization participation consistently focused on relationships with other successful professional families, rather than multi-generational community involvement that would have included elderly residents and intergenerational programming. The church attendance and religious community participation that provided Daniel's family with spiritual guidance and social connection operated through congregations that emphasized professional development, family success, and community service that supported middle-class family priorities, rather than challenging members to consider their obligations to elderly relatives and community members who required ongoing assistance and social support. The religious teachings that Daniel and Jessica received consistently validated their lifestyle choices, while minimizing discussions of intergenerational responsibility and elderly care obligation. The school district activities and parent involvement that Daniel and Jessica pursued for their daughter's educational benefit included parent-teacher organization leadership, fundraising committee participation, and academic support, volunteering that demonstrated their commitment to educational excellence, while building social connections with other affluent families whose children attended the same schools and participated in similar extracurricular activities and enrichment programs. The professional networking and business relationship development that enhanced Daniel's career prospects operated through industry associations, business development organizations, and commercial relationship building that connected him with other successful agricultural professionals, systematically excluding elderly community members whose wisdom and experience might have provided valuable guidance and historical perspective on agricultural industry changes and market development patterns. The recreational activities and hobby pursuits that Daniel and Jessica enjoyed during their leisure time included golf, fitness club membership, travel, and social dining that reflected their discretionary income, while consistently avoiding activities that might have included elderly family members or community service that addressed the needs of aging populations who required transportation assistance, social engagement, and practical support with daily living activities. The Christmas Eve shopping trip that Daniel assumed represented another example of my confused elderly shopping behavior that would probably result in inappropriate gift purchases and unnecessary spending, actually served as essential cover. Attending the Pinnacle Credit Solutions board meeting that would finalize character assessment protocols designed to identify and penalize exactly the kind of elderly neglect and family exploitation that Daniel was systematically planning and implementing. The gift purchasing obligations that Daniel had delegated to me for Christmas 2024 reflected his systematic approach to minimizing personal involvement in family celebration planning, while ensuring that appropriate presents were purchased for his daughters, without requiring his time, attention, or emotional investment in understanding their interests and preferences. His assumption that elderly relatives could handle routine shopping tasks while avoiding more complex social and emotional responsibilities demonstrated his transactional approach to family relationships and intergenerational support. The financial arrangements that Daniel had established for my Christmas shopping reflected his controlled approach to elderly financial management that provided limited resources for specific purposes while maintaining oversight and approval authority over expenditure decisions. The $300 budget that he had allocated for gifts and holiday expenses demonstrated his assumption that elderly spending should be monitored and restricted, rather than recognizing my autonomy and decision-making authority over personal financial resources. Me to take public transit and walk through December weather conditions to complete Christmas shopping tasks reflected Daniel's systematic neglect of elderly mobility needs and safety considerations that prioritized his convenience over my comfort and well-being. His assumption that elderly family members could navigate challenging weather conditions and transportation difficulties without assistance demonstrated his fundamental lack of empathy and consideration for aging-related physical limitations and vulnerability. The time constraints that Daniel imposed for completing Christmas shopping tasks reflected his expectation that elderly relatives should accommodate his schedule and priorities, rather than recognizing that adequate time and flexible planning were necessary for elderly people to complete errands safely and effectively. His impatience with the time required for elderly shopping expeditions demonstrated his systematic devaluation of elderly needs and his prioritization of efficiency over family respect and consideration. The communication expectations that Daniel maintained during my supposed shopping trip reflected his assumption that elderly relatives should provide regular updates and progress reports, rather than recognizing that constant monitoring represented surveillance and control rather than appropriate family concern and support. His demands for frequent phone calls and status updates demonstrated his systematic approach to elderly management that prioritized his peace of mind over my autonomy and independence. The conversations between Daniel and Jessica about my financial situation that I occasionally overheard during family gatherings revealed sophisticated planning for systematic elderly exploitation that extended far beyond simple convenience or cost-saving measures. Their discussions about my supposed declining independence and increasing need for financial management assistance demonstrated coordinated strategy development that would enable them to access and control elderly assets while maintaining the appearance of protective family care and responsible elder stewardship. Consultations that Daniel had initiated to explore guardianship procedures and elderly financial management options represented premeditated planning for systematic autonomy violation that would override my decision-making authority while providing legal protection for family members who assume control over elderly assets and living arrangements. These consultations, which Daniel assumed remained confidential, were actually monitored through Pinnacle Credit Solutions legal intelligence networks that tracked potential elderly abuse and family exploitation activities throughout the region. The financial analysis that Daniel and Jessica had conducted regarding my supposed assets and income sources revealed systematic investigation into elderly financial resources that exceeded their legitimate need for estate planning or family financial coordination. Their detailed knowledge of property values, investment accounts, and income sources demonstrated unauthorized research into personal financial information that indicated planning for systematic exploitation rather than appropriate family concern about elderly welfare and security. The housing arrangement discussions that Daniel and Jessica had pursued regarding alternative living options for my future care needs reflected their assumption that elderly housing decisions should prioritize family convenience and cost-effectiveness rather than respecting elderly preferences. Community connections and social support systems that provided meaning and stability during aging transition. Their research into assisted living facilities and residential care options demonstrated their systematic preparation for decisions that would benefit family financial interests rather than elderly well-being and autonomy. This comprehensive network of support systems, financial advantages, institutional assistance that had enabled Daniel's professional success while concealing the infrastructure that made his achievements possible would soon be revealed as completely dependent on the decisions and continued approval of the elderly family member whose financial limitations, technological confusion, he had been systematically exploiting and planning to override through legal manipulation and family coordination that prioritized convenience over respect and material advantage over moral obligation. The snowfall that had been forecast as a light dusting throughout the Twin Cities metropolitan area had intensified into a full blizzard by 4:30 p.m., creating exactly the kind of hazardous winter conditions that required family coordination and elderly protection rather than the systematic abandonment that would soon reveal Daniel's true character to both his community and the financial systems that determined his family's economic future. The Walmart parking lot in Bloomington, where Daniel had agreed to meet me after my supposed Christmas shopping expedition, had become a treacherous landscape of accumulating snow, ice-covered pavement, and visibility conditions that made walking dangerous for anyone, particularly elderly people whose balance and mobility might be compromised by winter weather and heavy shopping bags. The temperature had dropped to 14 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind gusts that created sub-zero wind chill conditions, capable of causing frostbite within minutes, for anyone inadequately dressed or stranded without shelter. When Daniel arrived 20 minutes late for our scheduled 5, his SUV's headlights, cutting through the swirling snow, revealed his obvious frustration and impatience with the weather conditions that were complicating his evening plans, rather than concern for my safety and comfort during the hazardous winter storm that was creating genuine emergency conditions throughout the metropolitan area. His failure to exit his vehicle to assist me with packages or offer immediate shelter demonstrated his systematic prioritization of personal convenience over elderly welfare and family responsibility. The conversation that followed through his partially open driver's window, designed to minimize his exposure to cold air rather than provide meaningful communication, revealed the depth of contempt and resentment that Daniel had been harboring toward me, while systematically planning financial exploitation disguised as family care and protective concern. His complaints about the inconvenience of winter weather, the time required for elderly assistance, and the interference with his holiday evening plans demonstrated how completely his character had deteriorated from the respectful young man who once valued family relationships and intergenerational support. "Mom, this is ridiculous," Daniel said through the crack in his window, his voice carrying the kind of exasperated impatience that he would never display toward customers or professional colleagues whose approval he needed for career advancement. "I told you to be done shopping by 4:30, and now we're dealing with this blizzard because you can't manage your time properly. Jessica and the girls are waiting for me at home, and I'm not going to spend my Christmas Eve dealing with elderly confusion and weather problems." The casual cruelty in his voice when he referred to elderly confusion revealed his systematic dehumanization of aging family members and his comfortable assumption that my supposed cognitive limitations justified impatience and disrespect rather than understanding and supportive assistance. His prioritization of his family's holiday celebration over my immediate safety during dangerous weather conditions demonstrated the moral failure that Pinnacle Credit Solutions' new character assessment protocols were specifically designed to identify and penalize. "Daniel, sweetheart, I understand you're anxious to get home," I replied through the increasingly heavy snowfall, maintaining the confused elderly tone that had concealed my true identity while testing his character under pressure. "But I'm having trouble walking on this ice, and I'm concerned about getting to my car safely in these conditions. Could you help me with these packages and make sure I get to my vehicle without falling?" The request for basic assistance that any decent person would provide automatically to an elderly family member during hazardous weather conditions triggered a response that revealed the complete absence of empathy, respect, and family loyalty that had once characterized Daniel's relationship with elderly relatives. His reply would provide documented evidence of character failure that justified the most severe consequences available through financial systems that prioritized moral character alongside traditional creditworthiness criteria. "Mom, I don't have time for this," Daniel said with growing agitation that revealed his systematic approach to elderly care as obligation management, rather than relationship nurture. "You're a grown adult, and you need to figure out how to handle basic tasks, like getting to your car without expecting everyone else to drop everything and provide assistance. This is exactly why Jessica and I have been discussing your declining independence and your need for professional care services that can handle these situations." The mention of discussions about my declining independence and need for professional care services confirmed that Daniel and Jessica had been systematically planning elderly exploitation while maintaining facades of family concern and protective intervention. His comfortable assumption that he could discuss my supposed limitations openly during my moment of vulnerability revealed his belief that elderly people lacked the cognitive capability to understand when family members were planning systematic autonomy violation and financial abuse. "Daniel, I'm not asking you to solve all my problems," I continued, maintaining my performance while documenting his character failure through security systems that were recording everything for subsequent legal and financial evaluation. "I just need a few minutes of assistance getting to my car safely. The parking lot is very icy, and I'm concerned about falling with these heavy packages. That's not my problem, Daniel replied with a tone of voice that would haunt him for the rest of his life once he understood the full consequences of his Christmas Eve character revelation. You chose to go shopping during a snowstorm, you chose to buy too much stuff to carry easily, and you chose to ignore my advice about limiting your activities when weather conditions are challenging. I'm not going to enable your poor decision-making by providing constant assistance that prevents you from learning to be more responsible. The psychological manipulation inherent in blaming elderly weather vulnerability on poor decision-making, rather than recognizing that winter conditions create legitimate safety concerns for aging family members, demonstrated sophisticated elderly abuse techniques that transformed victim blaming into apparent rationality and family concern. His use of clinical language about enabling and responsibility revealed professional consultation with elderly abuse specialists who had taught him to justify systematic neglect through therapeutic terminology and family intervention theories. Besides, Daniel continued, his voice taking on the cruel satisfaction that characterizes people who enjoy exercising power over vulnerable individuals. You need to start understanding that the world doesn't revolve around your convenience and your inability to handle modern adult responsibility. Jessica and I have been way too patient with your demands for assistance and your constant need for help with basic tasks that any competent person should be able to manage independently. The systematic character assassination that Daniel delivered while I stood in sub-zero wind chill conditions carrying heavy packages through a dangerous ice-covered parking lot provided perfect documentation of the moral failures that would justify complete destruction of his financial stability and professional opportunities through systems that prioritized character over traditional credit metrics, employment qualifications. You know what, Mom? Daniel said with obvious decision-making satisfaction as he prepared to deliver the abandonment that would trigger the most comprehensive demonstration of hidden authority that any family exploiter had ever experienced. I'm done enabling your helpless elderly act and your constant demands for assistance with problems you create for yourself. Figure out how to get to your car, figure out how to drive home safely, and figure out how to be a responsible adult instead of expecting everyone else to manage your life for you. Daniel, please, I said with genuine alarm that wasn't entirely performance, as I realized the depth of cruelty he was capable of demonstrating toward elderly family members during emergency situations. The weather conditions are genuinely dangerous, and I'm asking for just a few minutes of help. This isn't about independence or responsibility, it's about basic safety during a winter storm. That's exactly the kind of manipulation I'm talking about, Daniel replied with the kind of psychological sophistication that indicated systematic planning and professional consultation about elderly control technique. You create dramatic situations, and then use emotional manipulation to force family members to provide assistance that enables your continued dependence and poor decision-making. I'm not falling for it anymore. The sound of Daniel's SUV engine, accelerating as he prepared to abandon me. Walmart parking lot during sub-zero blizzard conditions provided the final piece of character evidence necessary to implement the most comprehensive financial destruction that any ungrateful family member had ever experienced, through systematic credit manipulation and professional opportunity elimination. I'm going home to my family for Christmas Eve, Daniel announced, through his barely open window as snow accumulated on my coat and packages, while I struggled to maintain balance on the icy pavement. When you're ready to have an adult conversation about taking responsibility for your own life and accepting professional care services, instead of demanding family assistance, we can discuss your future living arrangements and financial management needs. The thread about future living arrangements and financial management confirmed that Daniel's abandonment wasn't impulsive weather-related frustration, but rather calculated psychological warfare, designed to demonstrate his control and authority over elderly family members who dared to request assistance during emergency situations. His assumption that he possessed legal and moral authority to make decisions about my housing and finances revealed the systematic exploitation, planning,
that justified the most severe consequences available through financial networks that I controlled, but right now. Daniel continued with cruel satisfaction, as he shifted his vehicle into drive. You need to learn that other people have their own lives and priorities, and that means figuring out how to handle your own problems without expecting everyone to drop everything and rescue you from situations you create through poor planning and unrealistic expectations. As Daniel's SUV disappeared into the swirling snow, leaving me standing alone in the Walmart parking lot during dangerous blizzard conditions on Christmas Eve, I felt a combination of heartbreak and rage that would fuel the systematic destruction of his financial stability and professional opportunities through consequences that extended far beyond simple revenge into comprehensive character education about respect, family loyalty, and the hidden systems that determine economic survival in modern American society. The walk to my Honda Civic through accumulating snow and ice-covered pavement provided time to process the emotional devastation of witnessing my son's complete transformation into someone capable of abandoning elderly family members during emergency weather conditions, while simultaneously activating the financial and professional networks that would teach him exactly what happened when systematic elderly abuse collided with hidden authority and institutional power that prioritized character over traditional success metrics. The secure communication systems in my Honda Civic that connected directly to Pinnacle Credit Solutions emergency response networks enabled immediate implementation of character assessment protocols that would transform Daniel's comfortable assumptions about elder vulnerability into the most expensive lesson about family respect that any ungrateful relative had ever received through systematic financial and professional consequences. Emergency character assessment implementation. I spoke into the encrypted communication system as I sat in my vehicle, while snow accumulated on the windshield and the full scope of Daniel's betrayal settled into devastating clarity. Subject: Daniel Chen, Midwest Agricultural Solutions, Regional Territory Manager, demonstrated systematic elderly abandonment during emergency weather conditions on December 24, 2024, with complete audio and video documentation available for immediate review and consequence implementation. The response from Pinnacle Credit Solutions 24-hour Operations Center confirmed that all systems were operational and ready to implement the most comprehensive character-based financial destruction that our networks had ever coordinated for family exploitation and elderly abuse cases. The algorithms that would systematically eliminate Daniel's credit access, professional opportunity, and financial stability were activated within minutes of my emergency authorization, while I drove home through dangerous winter conditions that he had forced me to navigate without assistance or family support. The first phase of consequences implementation began at 11:47 p.m. on December 24, when automated systems initiated credit line suspensions, interest rate adjustments, and loan acceleration procedures that would transform Daniel's Christmas morning from family celebration into financial emergency management, as he discovered that every aspect of his economic stability depended on continued approval from institutional systems that prioritized character over traditional creditworthiness criteria. The mortgage payment processing system that had automatically withdrawn Daniel's monthly housing payment from his checking account for over 4 years suddenly required manual verification and character assessment review that would delay payment processing for 30 days, while Pinnacle Credit Solutions Review Board evaluated his eligibility for continued homeownership financing based on demonstrated family values and community character standards that he had systematically violated through elderly abuse and abandonment. The credit card accounts that Daniel and Jessica used for daily expenses, holiday purchases, and emergency financial management were simultaneously suspended pending character assessment review that would require documented evidence of family relationship improvement and community service completion before reinstatement of credit privileges that had previously been automatically approved based on income and payment history criteria. The automotive financing for both family vehicles entered immediate review status that would require character assessment, verification, and family reference interviews before continued financing approval, while the educational loan accounts that supported Emma and Sophie's private lesson and enrichment program expenses required similar character evaluation procedures that would determine continued eligibility for education-related credit products. The employment verification systems that validate Daniel's income and professional standing for all financial products and services were immediately flagged for character assessment review that would require Midwest Agricultural Solutions to provide detailed documentation about Daniel's customer relationships, professional conduct, and community involvement patterns that demonstrated character consistency with company values and agricultural industry standards. The agricultural financing networks that had enabled Daniel's customers to receive favorable equipment loans, land acquisition credit, and seasonal operating capital were restructured to require alternative sales representative coordination and customer relationship management that would eliminate Daniel's territorial advantages and commission income, while his character assessment review process determined his continued eligibility for agricultural industry employment. The customer relationships that had provided Daniel with consistent sales performance and commission income were systematically redirected to alternative Midwest Agricultural Solutions representatives whose character assessment scores indicated reliability, family loyalty, and community involvement that aligned with Pinnacle Credit Solutions, agricultural lending criteria, and rural economic development objectives. The industry recognition and professional credentials that had distinguished Daniel's career advancement were flagged for review by agricultural industry associations and certification organizations that required character assessment verification for continued membership and credential maintenance, while his speaking invitations and consultation opportunities were suspended pending character evaluation completion. The professional development programs and educational opportunities that had enhanced Daniel's agricultural expertise and industry standing were restricted pending character assessment review that would determine his continued eligibility for industry training and advancement opportunities that required demonstration of family values and community character consistent with agricultural industry leadership standards. The social networks and community relationships that Daniel and Jessica had developed through their suburban Edina lifestyle were systematically informed about character assessment concerns through communication channels that protected community safety while enabling neighbors and social context to make informed decisions about continued association and social inclusion based on demonstrated character patterns and family treatment standards. The church community and religious organization involvement that had provided Daniel's family with spiritual guidance and social connection received confidential character assessment information that enabled religious leaders to provide appropriate pastoral care and community support while protecting other elderly congregation members from potential family exploitation and abuse patterns that Daniel had demonstrated. The school district activities and parent organization involvement that had connected Daniel and Jessica with other affluent families were discreetly informed about character turns that enabled educational leaders and parent coordinators to implement appropriate safeguards and monitoring procedures that protected elderly, family members, and community volunteers from systematic exploitation and abuse. The professional networking and business relationship development that had enhanced Daniel's career prospects were informed about character assessment concerns through industry communication channels that enabled agricultural business leaders and potential customers to make informed decisions about professional relationships and business partnerships based on demonstrated character turns and family treatment standards.
The phone call that I placed to Daniel at 7:23 a.m. on December 25th while he was presumably discovering the systematic financial consequences of his Christmas Eve abandonment, would complete his education about hidden authority and the systems that determine economic survival in modern American society. "Daniel, Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I said, when he answered his phone with obvious stress and confusion about the financial emergencies that had begun overwhelming his holiday morning. "I hope you and Jessica and the girls are having a wonderful family celebration. I wanted to thank you for the valuable lesson you taught me last night about family relationships and elderly respect." "Mom, what are you talking about?" Daniel replied with the kind of distracted urgency that indicated he was simultaneously dealing with multiple financial crises and trying to understand what had triggered the systematic destruction of his economic stability. "I'm dealing with some banking problems this morning, and I don't have time for lengthy conversations about yesterday's weather situation." "Oh, Daniel, I completely understand that you're busy with financial concern," I replied with patient sympathy that concealed the devastating revelation that would transform his understanding of success, family relationships, and the consequences that follow when professional ambition overwhelms basic human decency and intergenerational respect. Banking problems can be so confusing and stressful, especially when they involve character assessment reviews and family relationship evaluation procedure. The silence that followed indicated Daniel's growing awareness that my knowledge of specific financial terminology and institutional procedures exceeded what elderly confusion and technological limitations would normally enable. While his systematic assumptions about my capabilities and understanding began crumbling, as he confronted evidence that challenged everything he thought he knew about family dynamics and hidden authority systems. "Mom, how do you know about character assessment review?" Daniel asked with growing alarm as he began recognizing that elderly confusion and financial limitations might have been carefully maintained performances rather than genuine cognitive decline and economic dependency. "That's very specific banking terminology that most people wouldn't understand unless they worked in financial services or had professional experience with credit evaluation procedures." "Well, sweetheart," I replied with the kind of patient explanation that elderly relatives provide when adult children finally demonstrate readiness to learn important life lessons. "I suppose it's time for me to introduce you to Margaret Chen, founder and CEO of Pinnacle Credit Solutions, the financial services conglomerate that has been quietly supporting your career advancement while evaluating your character development and family relationship patterns for potential long-term partnership and professional advancement opportunity." The devastating silence that followed provided perfect documentation of the moment when comfortable assumptions about elderly vulnerability collided with the reality of hidden authority and institutional power that determined economic survival and professional advancement throughout the Midwest agricultural and financial services industries. "That's impossible," Daniel whispered with the kind of psychological shock that accompanies complete worldview destruction and the recognition that fundamental assumptions about reality were systematically wrong. "You live in a small duplex and work part-time at the library. You get confused by smartphones and need help with online banking. You depend on family financial assistance and can't afford basic living expenses without our help." "Daniel, dear," I replied with gentle correction that would begin his comprehensive education about respect, humility, and the hidden systems that determine opportunities and consequences in ways that extend far beyond individual capability and personal achievement. "The modest lifestyle, occasional technological assistance requests, aren't because I'm incapable of understanding modern systems. They're strategic choices designed to maintain privacy while evaluating family character and community contribution patterns that determine eligibility for continued support and partnership opportunities." The explanation that followed would complete Daniel's education about character, consequence, and the reality that sometimes the people you dismiss as financial burdens might actually control the entire economic infrastructure that determines whether your family can maintain their lifestyle, achieve their goal, or access the opportunities necessary for continued prosperity and professional advancement. The agricultural financing networks that have enabled your customers to receive favorable equipment loans and seasonal operating credit are controlled by Pinnacle Credit Solutions. I continued while documenting Daniel's systematic comprehension of his complete dependency on institutional systems that prioritized character over traditional success metrics. The customer relationships that have provided your sales success and commission income were facilitated through our agricultural development program. The professional training and industry recognition that have distinguished your career advancement were coordinated through our educational partnerships and industry networks. But most importantly, Daniel, I said with the kind of moral authority that elderly wisdom provides when adult children finally demonstrate readiness to understand consequences and character development. The systematic abandonment and elderly abuse that you demonstrated last night has permanently disqualified you from Pinnacle Credit Solutions support networks and triggered character assessment protocols that will determine your family's economic future based on demonstrated moral character, rather than previous professional achievement or material success. The consequences that Daniel would experience over the following months would provide comprehensive education about respect, family loyalty, and the reality that economic survival in modern American society depends on character assessment and community standing that extends far beyond individual capability and professional performance. His mortgage would require complete refinancing at market rates without character assessment advantages. His credit access would be permanently restricted to secured products that required collateral and character references. His employment opportunities would be limited to positions that didn't require character assessment verification or community standing evaluation. I concluded with the kind of mercy that elderly wisdom provides, even when adult children have demonstrated systematic moral failure and family betrayal. Pinnacle Credit Solutions operates comprehensive character rehabilitation programs for people who demonstrate genuine commitment to moral development and community contribution that honors wisdom and experience alongside innovation and individual achievement. The character development requirements that would determine Daniel's eligibility for rehabilitation and eventual economic recovery included extensive community service with elderly populations, family relationship counseling, and the kind of genuine character work that enables people to succeed professionally while maintaining their moral foundation and intergenerational respect, that recognizes elderly wisdom as valuable guidance rather than obsolete burden. The story of how a cruel son learned that abandoning his elderly mother in a blizzard on Christmas Eve could cost him his credit score, his career, and his family's financial security became the most expensive lesson about elderly respect and character importance that any ungrateful family member had ever received. Sometimes the most powerful education you can provide manipulative relatives is understanding that elderly wisdom and hidden authority aren't optional conveniences that disappear when they become inconvenient for adult children's lifestyle preferences and professional advancement plans. Remember, family relationships built on genuine respect and intergenerational appreciation create foundations for mutual support and authentic achievement, while exploitation and elderly abuse destroy not only family bonds, but also the character development necessary for meaningful success. Community contribution that honors wisdom and experience as valuable guidance for moral development and professional advancement, that serves community welfare alongside individual prosperity. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.